Alrighty, that's working. Super. The GA for PhD career development, Jeffrey Young, is actually monitoring the chat box, and he'll be helping me to make sure that I answer all of the questions that get posed today. I just want to remind you that the session will be recorded, and the presentation and all of the slides and handouts will be posted on the grad school website. So that should be nice and convenient for you. Alrighty, let me actually go ahead and get started with today's topic, which is the academic job search. There I am, and that's Jeffrey. I really look forward to meeting you in person if I haven't already. If you're new to exploring the resources that are available for PhDs, go ahead and later on take a look at that overview of services that's actually in YouTube. It's 15 minutes, and you can watch or listen to it whenever. In the next hour, hopefully in the next half an hour, I'm going to present some basic information about what's happening with the academic job market and present some ideas about how you can make yourself a competitive candidate. And then we're going to talk at a very high level about what the academic hiring cycle and process is like. And throughout the presentation, I'll be talking about the different resources that are available to you. So once again, this is really a starting point or a foundational type workshop. And hopefully, this will provide some real food for thought that will get you challenged to come up with an action plan for the remainder of your time here at Maryland. Okay, you don't have to answer this in the chat box, but I really just want you to think about what you've been hearing about the academic job market. So this is just kind of rhetorical. What are some of the academic jobs that graduates in your program go on to? And what about other types of jobs? Do they go on to postdocs? Have you ever seen that information posted on your program website or heard your advisor talk about it? And also, what kinds of things are happening in your department or your college or school that can help you prepare for and find an academic job? Okay, so if you don't know the answers to these questions, this is just a little prompt or a poke to get you thinking about how you can start asking some of these questions. One of the things that I really want you to think about is how serious are you about pursuing an academic career? Because pursuing an academic career is really something that you need to put quite a bit of work into if you're going to be a competitive candidate. And so over the course of your studies, your commitment to pursuing an academic career might ebb and flow. But if you are committed, I'm going to strongly encourage you to really think about how you can leverage the resources and ideas that are presented in today's presentation. I don't want everyone to freak out. I know you're all hearing things about the academic job market. Some of you have probably heard really strong statements like, there are no jobs. That's not true. I'm not going to get all hung up in this data, but I thought I would provide it so that you can go and look at some of these sources later. Each of the graphs are cited. So the first thing I want you to notice is when we look at the number of doctoral degrees that have been awarded, many of your faculty advisors came onto the market in the 80s or 90s. And you can notice how much and how steep the growth in the number of doctoral degrees has been. The second chart that's over here is there's actually been a decline in the number of tenure-track positions and an increase in the number of other types of positions. And some of those other types of positions include professional teaching roles, which are not tenure-track, but they're rather long-term contractual positions. And the other type of information that I think is really interesting to look at is the types of appointments and how those types of appointments are actually spread out. So these data have come from an article in The Atlantic, and this from AAUP. So I'm always wary of statements that are things like, there are no jobs, there are no jobs. There are jobs, but the nature of the job market has changed significantly over the last 20 years. And for many of our faculty advisors, from the experience of going out on the job market in the last 10 years looks very different than what their experience was. Okay. I want to talk a little bit about just how higher education has changed, because this is important. If you're planning a faculty career, you're going to be working in the industry of higher ed. And I've been in higher ed for 30 years, so I've seen some major changes. And a lot of these changes are related to financial support and what the expectations are in certain positions. So for those of us that have been working in public universities, the percentage of the cost of the percentage of support to an institution has continued to decline as state budgets have really faced increased costs around things like prisons and infrastructure and cybersecurity. So the state budgets have stayed pretty flat, and in some states, the support has continued to decline. Another change is that there's been some real increased emphasis on teaching quality and being able to assess student learning outcomes. And some of that is related to the financial changes that have happened. In public education, people want to know that the quality of the education is effective, and that's why assessment has continued to be even more important. And there's one other trend that really has taken place, is that the prominence of community colleges as starting points. As the cost of education has increased, families with multiple college-age undergraduate students have really considered community colleges as very cost-effective ways for their students to start college. And for first-generation college students and other immigrant populations, students of color, community colleges are also a likely starting point. So there are all kinds of opportunities in community colleges that weren't there necessarily 20 years ago. Okay, so let's look ahead. I want you to really be aware of what a highly competitive candidate looks like. And before I really talk about this, I want to share with you that I have heard faculty, more senior faculty, say, oh my goodness, the bar has really been raised. The expectations of what a new PhD graduate brings to their first faculty position has changed. So, of course, a record of research has always been important, but it's even more important today, and especially publications. Being a reviewer on peer-reviewed publications, and having the opportunity to have been an instructor of record, and really having clarity about one's ability to teach a whole set of courses. So I know for some of you listening, the way assistantships and other training experiences are structured, you may or may not have a chance to become an instructor of record. But I wanted to throw that out there because you may need to look or lobby within Maryland or look outside of Maryland for opportunities to be an instructor of record. In addition, having training on learning technology, platforms like Canvas, and also using multimedia ways of delivering content is even more important as today's students have changed, along with the ability to assess classroom learning. In addition, experience with student and learner diversity is really important. Being visible professionally and being known within one's discipline is also part of being highly competitive. And so oftentimes that means rather than just being a consumer at a professional conference where you go and present a poster or a presentation, there's the expectation that you've organized sessions and that you've already started to build connections with other future faculty within your own discipline and even interdisciplinary connections. And finally, part of being competitive is about serving in your department on committees, taking leadership roles, and also having experience formally and informally mentoring and advising undergraduate and other graduate students. So it's really the whole package. It's not just about having a degree in hand. It's about building your skill set related to teaching, scholarship and research, and service, which includes advising and mentoring. Okay, so how are you going to make yourself as competitive as possible? These 6 pieces are going to guide the rest of the presentation, so I'm going to go into more depth about them. But in some ways, it mirrors the career development process because it starts with you having clarity about yourself. It moves on to you really understanding what the faculty role is all about and the different types of opportunities that are available. And then it moves into your being able to come up with a professional development plan that's going to allow you to build the skills to make you competitive. And lastly, it's about learning the mechanics of the job search. So the mechanics sort of come at the end, but usually, or oftentimes, unfortunately, that's when students start accessing services. So I'm hoping that you'll be convinced that you want to spend some time on some of these other parts of the process. Okay, so let's talk about this knowing yourself and kind of refining who you want to be as a faculty member. I don't know if you've thought about these things yet, but where do you see yourself as a faculty member? Are you in a research or a teaching role? What type of institution? What types of students do you want to work with? And what type of mix of duties do you want to have? Because the faculty role looks really different depending on the type of setting that you're in. So rather than just saying, oops, I definitely want to be a faculty member, I think you need to give a little bit of thought and exploration to what that job looks like in different settings. One of the quick ways to do some self-assessment and learn a little bit more about the teaching intensive and research intensive faculty roles is to actually start inside of Imagine PhD, and I talk a lot about that in some other workshops. But it's free, it's online, you go to the website, you make a free account, and then you take the assessments. And after you complete the assessments, you definitely could come in and do a one-on-one appointment to go over it, because the assessment will help you see where your interests and skills are aligned or where there are some gaps in terms of alignment with your fit for faculty roles in teaching or research-focused faculty roles. I will say that this tool was developed for humanities, arts, and social sciences, but quite honestly, I use it regularly with STEM students as just a great starting point to open up that conversation about what type of faculty job are you going to look for. Okay. Secondly, you definitely want to understand the faculty job market and trends in your discipline, and you want to start educating yourself about those different types of faculty positions and institutions. And the only way to do that is to really watch job postings and do some informational interviews. Okay, so these are some sources of information about higher education and faculty life. Inside Higher Ed has a series of articles and information as well as job postings. You can sign up for a daily email address. AAUP publishes a report about the economic state of the faculty position. That's another way to learn more about faculty roles. And lastly, you can sign up for a free email update. It's from Chronicle Vitae. That's from the Chronicle of Higher Ed, which, by the way, if you're not reading and you're considering higher education careers, you want to start scanning. Chronicle Vitae also has some searchable articles on lots of different career advice related to the professoriate. So I would say these are some ways that you can just start to pay attention to what the dialogue is around faculty careers. And the sooner that you can do this, the better. Okay, and I mentioned watching job postings. So one of the really quick ways to watch job postings is to sign up through higheredjobs.com for, you can search for jobs, you can search by region of the country, discipline, type of job, and then you can save that search agent so that on a daily or weekly basis, you get jobs pushed to you. And it means you can also set up a number of different search agents. So let's propose you are looking for jobs in the Northeast and on the West Coast. Or maybe you're an interdisciplinary person and you want to monitor jobs in a number of different fields. So if you are not familiar with some of these job sites, I would suggest that you actually set up these search agents and just start scanning job postings. My GA Jeffrey, who's on this call, man, he's awesome. He started watching job postings for quite a while. And once you start, a while ago, and once you start watching them, you start to get a sense of the types of skills that they're looking for. And also you start to read about and learn about institutions that you never would have considered. They weren't on your radar screen. Okay. So let's talk about this notion of building skills and experiences and building your network and seeking mentorship. So if you haven't heard about this yet, there is this thing called an individual development plan, or an IDP, and the template for the IDP will be posted with the slides and the recording on the graduate school website. But this IDP, it's essentially like the review process that I go through in my job. I set up goals at the start of each year, and then halfway through the year, I take note of where I am. And then at the end of the year, I sort of look back, and then I might adjust my plan for the following year. So in terms of professional development, if your goal is an academic career and you're really serious about it, you could, along with the advice from some mentors and maybe some members of your program that have recently been through the academic job search or have landed a faculty position, you could set up some goals for yourself each year that are related to preparing yourself for the faculty role. So for example, finding funding and being visible at conferences, all of those things are important. And so you might work backwards and put in some milestones related to publication, submitting journal articles, submitting proposals for presenting papers at conferences, or actually applying for small grant funding right now so that you could establish that kind of track record. And once you get closer to the year that you'll be going out on the job market, you might even set up some dates related to submitting applications. And I also want to note that for international students, you want to keep other deadlines related to OPT within your schedule as well. And that's a really nice reminder for me to say a little bit about our international students. A few points to keep in mind. OPT, if you're in the STEM disciplines, you get the 1 year plus 2 years of extension if you're in a STEM discipline, an approved STEM discipline. So that may give you the latitude to continue building your skills in a postdoc position. Also, quite a large percentage of our international students are returning to teaching positions in their home countries where there may be an abundance of opportunities, or they're also, as our domestic students, they are also seeking international faculty careers. And we could do a whole session on that. But I wanted you to start thinking about your individual development plan and some of the tasks that might go into it as related to preparing for a faculty career. Okay, I want to chat a little bit about resources. And some of you may know about these, and for some of you, it may be the very first time that you're hearing about it. And I think I will actually do maybe a quick little demonstration. So the first resource I have on here is the Graduate School Writing Center. So the Graduate School Writing Center is going to help you finish your dissertation and help you with academic writing. I love what my colleague Dr. Linda McCree says. she says, academic English is no one's first language. So if you have not used the Writing Center for consultation and support around writing and communication, giving presentations, you definitely want to check out their website. The second resource I have up here, the Teaching and Learning Transformation Center. So I'm going to quickly Google it, TLTC, yep, at Maryland. Again, if you are headed toward a faculty career, you absolutely want to look at the University Teaching and Learning Program. There are, this is training that is going to help you build your skills around your quality of teaching and assessment, and some of this is online and some of it is in person. But this is a nice way for you to zone in on the kinds of skills that potential academic employers are going to expect you to have. The other thing is that they do a series of workshops and seminars. That is done in collaboration with CERTL at UMD. So CERTL at UMD is, Maryland is part of a consortium of over 40 institutions. They offer free webinars for future faculty related to topics like classroom assessment techniques, writing an effective CV. Each of the 42 institutions offers online training that is available to everyone in the consortium. So if you have not had an opportunity to look at the training offerings, please go ahead and look at that, because these are the types of workshops and professional development activities that you would want to add to your IDP. Lastly, Maryland just subscribed to the National Center for Faculty Development and Diversity. And this is an awesome, awesome resource. All of these things are free to you. The National Center for Faculty Development and Diversity has a core online training program related to 3 areas that are really important to being successful in a faculty career. Big shocker, number 1 is writing. So they host online workshops and have resources, writing challenges. So for example, they had a summer writing challenge related to how are you going to prepare a journal article. They also have advice and a kind of a core online course that talks about mentoring relationships and navigating your career. So this, again, is a super resource for skill building around what it takes to be not only a competitive candidate, but later to advance in your faculty. I'm going to stop. So that's all of the, how do you make yourself competitive, and the resources that are there. The next part of what we're going to talk about is about this whole job application process. And even though this little diagram is really about the industry or government job application process, the funnel image is exactly the same for a faculty position. So at the start of the process, you submit an application packet. I would say in faculty jobs, even before an application gets submitted, there's some behind-the-scenes conversations that happen related to what postings might be coming up in the future, and there are faculty conversations within the network about really promising teachers and scholars who are getting ready to graduate or who are coming on the market. I'm going to talk more specifically about the process for the faculty job application process and interview process, but I just want to remind you that it may take a large number of applications to actually advance to the next level, which would be some type of phone screening interview, and then an on-campus interview, followed by an offer and the negotiation before the position is accepted. So this is quite a lengthy process. Okay, so if you want to be competent at running an academic job search, these are the pieces of it, right? So this is my advice. If you don't have clarity about what type of academic position you want to ideally land in. You want to start working on clarifying and researching that. When you are a year out from going on the market, probably in the spring of the year before you go out on the market, and hopefully well before that, you start having a series of conversations, not only with your faculty advisor, but with other faculty mentors, so that you can better understand the search strategies that happen in your particular discipline. Okay, I mentioned earlier that there's some conferencing kinds of places you need to be if you're going to be out on the academic market. And there also will be opportunities for you to interact with potential future colleagues at those conferences. During the summer before you go out on the market, you want to work with the TLTC to develop a draft of materials that you can tailor later on. And it's quite a process. It's a very reflective and iterative process to develop the materials that you need for an academic application process. In addition, you're going to need to prepare yourself for typical interview questions and the whole process of presenting yourself in such a powerful way that you're going to advance forward in each step of the process. And lastly, you'll need to learn about negotiations that happen around an offer, and particularly around startup packages in STEM. That's its own animal, and that's where your faculty mentors and advisors are absolutely invaluable. All right. So I want to talk about this whole notion of a tenure track position. There's a lot that happens from the creation. So a department has to get authorization that they're going to hire someone, like a year in advance. And then the committee, a hiring committee, actually writes the ad and it gets posted. So for those of you who are already out on the market, you probably have started to see the postings that have been there, not only in the Chronicle or on higheredjobs.com, but other venues in your discipline. Soon after applications are submitted, application packets, that committee reviews them and they start to vet applications and they come up with a list, a long list. And then they kind of whittle it down. And they usually come up with some individuals that they want to interview. And they're going to usually do that first screening either by phone or on Google Hangout. I've worked with some doc students that have had international interviews, like at totally different time zones. And then campus visits usually start at the start of the new year. Or it might be a little earlier, depending on the timeline for that campus. And usually, once candidates are brought to campus, the candidates are ranked and there's some type of decision made. And then there's an offer and a negotiation and a contract. And then that person shows up, usually in the summer or August, depending on what they've negotiated as their start date. So as you can see, it's quite a year-long process. Okay, I just wanted to share with you some of the documents that you need to perfect. And I mentioned the TLTC. Pay attention to their sign up for and pay attention to their biweekly newsletter. You definitely want to keep working on building your CV. You want to start learning more about academic cover letters. And at some point, maybe the summer before you go out on the market, or even in the January, the year before you go out on the market, you're going to sign up for one of the teaching philosophy workshops or the teaching portfolio workshops, the multi-day sessions that are held by the TLTC, or maybe you attend some sessions like this at your professional conferences. Oftentimes they'll have a graduate student track. If you are headed toward a research institution and position, you definitely want to start crafting your research statement. There are models of this, usually on professional websites, and I can point you to some resources as well. And some of you are also going to develop a website or have an e-portfolio where you are Creating a collection of artifacts that showcase your teaching and your research. And lastly, even if you're headed toward a faculty position, more and more junior faculty are on LinkedIn as scholars, just so that you can stay connected with other Maryland alumni. So as you can imagine, it takes time to develop these things, so you don't want to wait until October or September of the year that you go out on the market. You want to start thinking about these documents 2 years before you go out on the market and start building some of these things. Okay, so let's dig a little bit more into sort of the phases. So the application packet has to be pristine and convincing and powerful so that you get invited to some type of screening interview. And there's practice that goes into that screening interview, because even if it's an informal conversation over coffee at a conference, you're still being screened. So you want to be prepared. And I have some typical preparation advice here. You want to understand the position, you want to understand the department and the institution, and you want to be prepared to talk about the experiences that you've had and how they relate to the position you're interviewing for. So, like the application packet is designed to get you to the screening interview, your performance in the screening interview is all about getting you to the campus visit. I don't know if any of you have done a campus visit or heard others talk about it, but it's quite a process, right? It is a day-long experience. So in many cases, there's travel to be arranged, and then there could be dinner the night before or meetings on the day of your arrival, followed by a very full schedule the following day where you meet with different constituents. And in addition, you might be asked to do a job talk and or a teaching demo. There's a lot of moving pieces, and as you think about preparing for a campus visit, you're thinking about how you would respond to all of these different constituents, like what kinds of things would you want to tell students? What kinds of things would you want to tell faculty in your department? What kind of conversation would you want to have with a department chair or a dean or a provost? And it's not over once you leave. You also have to write some thank you notes and follow up with people, especially the individual that's really worked on your arrangements. Oftentimes you have to submit an expense report for your travel, et cetera. And this is, setting up this whole campus visit is a process where you should be asking lots of questions about the day. Okay? So we're making our way down that funnel. So as I mentioned, this is just a really quick overview. I want to mention some resources. If you are thinking about a faculty position, I regularly recommend The Professor is In by Karen Kelsey. She also has a blog, and she writes for Chronicle Vitae. So if nothing else, reading her materials will give you a roadmap from which you can develop great questions to ask your advisor about how things work in your discipline. Or it can help you formulate questions for informational interviews that you might do with recent graduates from your program who have secured faculty positions. I mentioned professional associations. The MLA actually has information about preparing for careers at community colleges. And then, of course, there's the handbook that I've got for you. Okay, I am surprised so often. Many of our doc students are not joining professional associations consistently, and they're not consistently involved. The student fees are rather low, and it gives you entree to who your future colleagues would be, and also the opportunity to become involved in the annual meetings in some different ways. So if you're not actively becoming a planner and someone who's organizing parts of your professional conference, I would strongly encourage you to do that so that you can begin to build your future faculty network. Okay, last disclaimer. So while I've done this broad overview of what it takes to be competitive and prompted you with resources that you can use, ultimately, one of the best resources, in addition to what I've covered, are your own faculty mentors, not just your primary advisor, but peers, alumni, staff members, and associations. And I challenge you to really open up your eyes and pay attention to the kinds of resources and conversations that are happening around preparing to be a faculty member in your discipline. Okay. One last point, one thing to think about. If you wait until your very last year to start thinking about transitioning from your role as a student to your role as a future faculty member, there's going to be a lot of stress. You can think about it. In your last year, you're spending a lot of time on your dissertation, and you are having these interactions with your committee where you're waiting for permission to move on to the next step, and you're tired by then. And you're really in this position, there's a power differential. When you go out on the academic job market, and if you're doing that at the same time as you're finishing up, it's almost like you need to take on a totally different persona. You're being asked to present yourself as a new professional. You are asked to talk about the courses you're prepared to teach and the research, your research agenda, not the research agenda of your former advisor or the you're going to be asked to really share during the screening interviews and at on-campus interviews who you are and how you are going to fit and add value to that department. So it's a real flip-flop. And that's why the more that you can learn about the type of faculty role that you want to prepare for and build those skills and start making those connections, you will be so much more prepared to make that transition from your doctoral program or current postdoc to an academic position. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground. I want you to think for a moment and just somewhere write down something that you would like to do next. Are you going to look into some of the resources that I've mentioned? I will also be posting this checklist that contains steps for building a competitive record for an academic career. I would encourage you to take that little questionnaire. That will help you think about what kinds of things you want to build into your individual development. Okay, this is where we do some Q&A. I want to give you a few moments to type your questions into the Q&A box. I'm going to go back and take a look to see what questions have been there already. All right, so just a reminder, you want to go ahead and put your questions in the lower left-hand corner. Okay. I see someone saying, I'm not in STEM, but in history. Wouldn't it be wiser to build skills both for a job in academia and other sectors? I am so glad that you asked that question. And of course, absolutely. I would say, as you educate yourself about the job market in your discipline, that you have you're preparing yourself for multiple career paths. And that might even be true for some people in STEM who are realizing that they aren't going to want to pursue a faculty career. I would say this is not just a history issue, but absolutely, I would get a better sense about the types of jobs that are out there by watching the job postings, and I would, at my professional association meetings and websites, I would listen carefully to what the conversation is in my discipline. And I know the American Historical Association does a lot at each conference to talk about career paths. Dylan Rudinger is a fantastic resource, and they have been building out information on their website, as have MLA for modern languages. The other thing I want to point out is in the life sciences, there's been a conversation going on about preparing for careers outside of academia for almost a decade now. So it's not just in the humanities that the job market is tight and competitive, but it's kind of competitive across the board based on those graphs that I showed where the number of doctorates continues to increase and the number of tenure track positions decrease. Okay, someone is saying, let me read this carefully. Okay. So someone is saying that they've been working, Corbin's saying that he's been working on building non-academic skills, and it's hard sometimes. Yes, Corbin, I really appreciate you saying that because there's a couple of things going on. Okay, so this is how I see it from my seat as a career advisor. I oftentimes work with doctoral students and postdocs that they have been preparing for an academic career all through undergrad, perhaps through a master's, and now in a doctoral program. So it might be for the past decade. And when you've been thinking and focused on one thing, it can feel really difficult to pivot, right? So part of it is the change of plans. That makes it feel challenging. The other part that can be challenging is that doctoral education is also in a period of transition. So there are conversations going on within graduate education about how do we prepare the next generation of faculty, and how do we prepare all of our doctoral students for a variety of career paths in academia, industry, nonprofits, government. So we're in this period of transition. So my second point about why it feels hard is that PhD training historically was set up to prepare future faculty. And we're in this awkward period of change where our faculty members may or may not have the knowledge or experiences to be able to provide good advice. Not that they don't want to, it's that their training was in that traditional way. As I interact with our doc students and postdocs, I'm finding that more of the junior faculty, the assistant faculty members who are on the market in the last 5 or maybe up to 8 years, really get how things have changed. So I want to encourage all of you to think about how you could use your individual development plan to identify ways to build the skills that employers want. Teamwork, leadership, technology skills. Depending on your field, it may be programming, languages, or different software packages. Research skills. In today's economy, data and research skills transcend industries. So I think that many of you have training that does carry over. The challenge is getting comfortable as someone with a PhD to be able to translate to employers the value that you add. How would you evaluate the impact on one's career of not getting a degree from an Ivy League university? I frequently heard that academic faculty members. Yeah, okay, so this notion of the elite privates and the Ivies. And I don't have the citation on hand, but I know that there have been some research studies looking at where the pipeline is for faculty members in certain disciplines. And I would be speaking from a very uninformed, like recently informed position to say that only people from Ivies get hired. I'm gonna say there's some element of that, absolutely. But Maryland and other Big Ten universities have an excellent track record of producing faculty. So here's my answer to it. I think you should look at where have the graduates from your program been securing faculty positions. There are a number of factors that go into this. So let me give you an example. I know that I've worked with doc students that have been placed in the region. They have found positions within the region, and that has happened for a variety of reasons. Some of them want to stay here in the DC area. Some are not willing to take a position just anywhere. Others have had connections to particular institutions. So I worked with someone from physics who just accepted a position at a teaching university, and she actually leveraged her network. I believe it was someone who was a faculty mentor when she was an undergrad. So I think saying that if you're not from an Ivy League or an elite, you're not going to get a faculty job, that's one way to look at it. But I think that's a limiting view. And I'm not being naive, but there can be individuals from some of those elites that that may not be prepared as prepared as you are. So yeah, there's some element of that, but I wouldn't use that as an excuse. That goes back to my other question, how serious are you? So I think you need to look into what the market is like for all types of teaching positions, and then make the best decision you can about what's important to you. I know that it is absolutely true that some people go out on the market multiple times, and you're going to have to decide if you are willing to do that, if that is the situation in your particular discipline, or based on some of the criteria that you have for the type of position you take. And I really want to acknowledge that not everyone is willing to just pack everything up and move to another part of the country. So I think that if you are in this because you're serious about it, do everything you can to be competitive, educate yourself about going out on the market, and then continue to evaluate your prospects as you move along. And I love the idea of educating yourself simultaneously. If the data and the information you learn about your discipline have another alternative, and don't think about it as a less than alternative. Think about it as multiple alternatives. Some of the messaging that happens can make you feel ashamed if you're interested in teaching in a liberal arts or a community college. Some of the messaging that if you take an industry job, it was that you couldn't cut it. Now, I'm sharing things that students have told me. And whether or not those messages are being delivered, I think ultimately this is your career and your career path, and you have to decide where you will fit and be the most happy and satisfied. It's your life. Okay. Let's see if there's any last questions. Thank you for asking those questions. That was wonderful. And I really hope that you'll continue to have these kinds of conversations with other students in your department, other students and postdocs that you meet at conferences, because the more that you can educate yourself and really look at the facts about what's going on in your discipline, the more equipped you'll feel to make an informed choice. Okay, so last call for questions. Let me look in the chat box to see if I missed anything from the chat. Q&A. All right, it looks like I've answered everything that was in both the chat box and the Q&A. When I close out this session, a survey is going to pop up. Please give us some feedback about your webinar experience. It'll take us a few days to get this closed captioned webinar posted on the grad school website. Let's see, Jeffrey is saying there's a few more questions. I apologize. Thank you, Jeffrey. Let me go back and just review these. So I mentioned teaching and research positions. Start and imagine PhD, and I think your preferences about where you want to fit, that would be a great thing also to talk in an individual advising about. Is that Ivy League? Do these tips on how to make one competitive also apply to faculty positions outside the U.S.? Thank you for asking that question. So here's my thought. I am not an expert on what is happening in individual disciplines in individual countries, but I would say that this is where leveraging your network, the connections that your faculty members have, and maybe even trying to connect and network with presenters at your conferences and doc students who may, in your conferences that also may be international, because there are many nuances and differences about faculty life in European countries, in China, in India, and I do not propose to have that knowledge. If you're thinking about returning to your home country, my advice is that you make sure you educate yourself on what's customary there, because you are going to be living in two worlds. You will be completing your doctorate here, but you will be preparing for the job market in your home country. So you want to be able to understand the application processes and timelines. And you want to build a professional network in that country or countries. Okay, are there any specific tips for those who are interested in a research faculty position but also have a professional background? I think that's fantastic. I see a lot of that in the School of Public Health. I would say on your CV, you are going to be listing your professional experience. And I would say, while you might get messages that training is irrelevant, I would say that it's probably going to be invaluable and very valuable. And those would be the kinds of things that I would talk specifically with a career advisor about. But there are ways on your CV to present and leverage your professional network, the network of people that you knew from your previous professional work. Okay, and last question, can I speak a bit more about tenure track, non-tenure track, and one would choose one over the other? Whew, that's a big question. So first thought, start watching job postings. So let me just talk about here at Maryland. So it's interesting the language that we use, tenure track, non-tenure track. Well, at Maryland, we just started calling them professional track faculty. So in a broad sense, tenure track will have nuances depending on whether it is a Research One university, a teaching university, or a community college. And yes, community colleges do have tenure. So tenure track, there's a peer-reviewed process where you advance through the different stages, from assistant professor at the start to associate and then to full tenure. And that peer-reviewed process results it takes about a decade, probably 8 to 10 years to become tenure track, and that's a whole process in and of itself. A non-tenure track position or a professional teaching position, the role and the job duties would look very different. So a professional teaching position would include many more classes taught in an academic year. There probably would be additional advising or service roles, but there would not be the expectation for publication, grants, securing grant funding, or doing research. Here's a caveat. There are some institutions, liberal arts colleges, where faculty who have been trained at Research One universities, as most have been, do obtain grants, and they build their own research into the teaching of undergraduates. So that's how a tenure track position would look different at a teaching college. So non-tenure track positions can be 1 year, 5-year contracts. So usually in these professional teaching positions, there's a longer-term commitment to that person. I'm going to speak like in the life sciences. So there might be a professional track teaching faculty member who's responsible for a particular set of undergraduate courses from start to finish. And all of these different nuances are things that you should be paying attention to in job postings and then asking your own faculty advisor. There's one thing I want to point out, that there are visiting professorships that oftentimes are billed as postdocs. So all of this language gets so confusing. And then, of course, there are adjunct faculty where you're kind of paid by the course. Now, this is where caution comes in. Paid by the course and working at multiple institutions does not make a living wage. And I'm going to share my own opinion. I think personally, that can be picking up a course here or there can be a wonderful thing if you decide that you want to be on a different career path and continue to teach in your discipline. Or it can be an opportunity to be a visiting professor in a small liberal arts college and really test that out as a postdoc. But you really cannot expect that these short-term adjunct contracts are going to lead to a tenure track job. That may not be the case, and it would be the course of great disappointment. So my short answer is ask lots of questions, read job postings, and then really figure out what works best for you. Okay? So I think we've covered all of the questions. I am going to take 1 minute and show you where you're going to find all of the posted materials. I went to the grad school website, and then I'm going to click on Students, Professional and Career Development, my section of the website. If you haven't explored it, go ahead and do that. Webinar materials. And Jeffrey and I have been posting these here, and these 2 recordings are going to go up today. All of our past webinars are posted, so you can listen to the recording, look at the slides, and any handouts. So that's where you'll find those. And then if you want to make an appointment with me, let me show you where you do that on Careers for Terps. You go to careers.umd.edu, you click on Careers for Terps. You all have a Careers for Terps account. On students. If you're a postdoc, email me directly, smarty, smarti18@umd.edu. And if you haven't been in your Careers for Terps account for a while, update your profile. If you're planning on going to the career fair next week, update your profile because your name tag and your program and year of graduation will be set up for the name tags from your profile. Click on Request a Career Advising Appointment. For PhDs, you should check me. If I haven't said it already, if you're an engineer, learn about engineering career services and make an appointment there. They are the specialists. They have the greatest connection with engineering alumni and employers. So utilize their services. If you are in the School of Business or the School of Public Policy, same thing. Visit the website of your career services office and begin engaging with them. I'm more than happy to chat with you, but ultimately you would definitely want to get connected to them. So just check my name and then check availability. The system only shows 2 weeks of appointments. Before you schedule your appointment, go here to My Resumes and upload any documents you want me to review during your appointment. So let's say next Monday worked for you, you would click on that. You have to tell me why you're coming here, like is it job search, career exploration? And you can put a little note here for me. We will have a 45-minute appointment. I make sure our doc students and postdocs have 45 minutes. You can send me a little note, excuse me, about what you want to talk about, but I don't see that note until the morning of. So I come in the morning, I look at my appointments, I look at your account in C4T, I read your note, and then when you walk through the door, I'm ready to meet with you. If you would prefer to meet on Google Hangout, once you schedule your appointment, send me an email and say, Susan, I would like to meet on Google Hangout. And then we can meet remotely. So you don't have to leave your lab or home or whatever. When you submit the request, you will get an email reminder. You'll get a confirmation, and then you'll get a reminder, I believe, 24 hours in advance. If you need to change your appointment, you can just go ahead and change it in C4. So that is all of the time that we have together. I really appreciate that you took the time to attend today's webinar. Tell your friends about this. Take action. Go back and share these resources with your friends as well. And I look forward to working with you.